Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jar of Words. We have Peter Kalu, and he is our hot seat guest for this month. So I'm just going to start by welcoming you, Pete. Thank you for accepting my invitation. And we normally start with an introduction. So please introduce yourself.
Okay, my name's Pete Kalu. I'm a writer. I write fiction, long fiction, short stories. I write poetry. I also do theatre and occasionally TV scripts. So yeah, I'm a jack of all trades writing wise. I have a number of novels that you can find if you Google me.
Fantastic. If you were to introduce one novel, one of your writing as must be read, what would that be? Which one?
Well, it's always the last thing I've written. The last thing I've written is always the best thing ever, and that completely shades everything else that I've ever done. So it's not available at the moment, but I obviously, because I'm just writing it, but I'm really pleased with this short story I'm writing called The Rise and Fall of Sharon Scream. Mm-hmm. And it is set in the 1970s punk era. Wow. It's about a punk teenager who starts a band. So there you go. That's the best thing I've ever written.
Wow, fantastic. Well, I think if it's not the case, it's bad news, because it shows that you haven't grown, you haven't moved forward. So it is expected. So that's pretty good. Tell us a little bit about Commonword. Obviously, you are involved with Commonwords, and it is one of my favorite writing organizations. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that as well, please?
Yes, Commonword is a creative writing organization that serves writers of the North and particularly the Northwest. And it's been going for 30 years. What we do is we find emerging writers and we help them develop their text, whether that be fiction, poetry, sometimes even theatre, stage, monologue, whatever form of creative writing you're interested in. We try to help you make it better, improve it, and we try to make you successful, find avenues for it, provide platforms for it, so that 2-3 years down the line, you're sitting in your Hollywood studio or trailer about to watch your film that you wrote be made into a major blockbuster, and just for a microsecond you'll remember Commonword and what we did for you.
Yeah, that's great. It's very rare, I must say, that there are organizations like that stand by you when you are at the earliest stage of your development. It's fair enough, when you're famous, everybody wants you if you've made it, but quite often a simple encouragement, somewhere that you could feel that you're not being judged, you could share your writing at whatever stage it is, and be helped to take a step forward. It doesn't matter where you are at that particular moment, but you've been helped to move forward, and that's very rare. So well done to Commonword, and well done to all of you.
Thank you.
There. I started coming to sessions in Commonword when you were still in the old place a few years ago, but it's always been a joy to be involved with Commonword. So thank you for everything that you do, not just everything that you've done for me, for writers at the start of their career. So it's great. And apart from what you do with Commonword, you were my mentor as I developed the novel that I'm still working on it, and hopefully it'll be published soon. Now that I've talked about it, I'm just going to open a bracket and include an ad here. On 20th of June, I'll be reading extracts from this unpublished novel that I talked about at 4 o'clock, Stockport Library. It's a free event, so it would be fantastic to have people who are interested in reading, writing, to see them there. So let's close the bracket and carry on with what we are doing. So currently you are writing short stories. Tell us a little bit about different format of writing. I mean, you said that you're doing a whole range of things, but for someone who starts, how would they know, how would they find out about themselves, in what genre they're better at writing, or whether it's poetry, short story, novel? What sort of factors decide which one you go for?
Well, there are different issues involved. There may be a kind of artistic sensibility, which is those who are inclined towards a metaphor are probably more inclined toward poetical forms of writing, and those who are more context in what I've some theories called contiguity writing that connects and forms from sort of metonymic writing. They're better at the prose and longer fiction. So that's an analysis based on, it's kind of almost like your mental makeup, but far more important, I think, actually, than these esoteric things is just how much chaos do you have in your life? Because if you have a lot of chaos, and for instance, if you have 2 or 3 small children that you're responsible for, and they're running around all day, you got to pick them up, drop them off, you got to do this, got to do that. I swear down that to try and write a novel through all that chaos is really difficult. It's better to take on the short story, which you can put down and pick up with relative ease. With a long piece, like a novel, is much harder to pick up. And similarly, for poetry, if you're interested in the how words sound in particular, and the cadence of words, and you're not so interested in telling a story, having a beginning, middle, and an end, but you're more interested in the language and having fun with the language itself, well, poetry is probably the best playground in which to explore those kind of things. So it's a combination. Oh, plus it's right. You can write a poem in like 30 seconds, a minute, in between the school run and all other kinds of things. So yeah, it depends on what your sensibility is, perhaps, and two, what the pragmatics, what the practical side of your life looks like. I know when I'm involved with in personal relationships, and I always know that as soon as I decide I'm going to write another novel, woe will fall upon me, because everyone then says, you're neglecting me, you have no time for me, you never turn out for anything I'm doing, and you never turn up weddings, funerals, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, anything else, because it's a stamina game, the novel. Unless, I mean, one of my other friends, he only writes one novel every 10 years, and so that's his way of dealing with the chaos that surrounds him. But myself, I prefer to finish a novel, start and finish it within, say, 3 years. That's just my rhythm. Every writer has a different rhythm, and so I know that once I've decided to start a novel, it'll be 3 years of work and of concentration before I get to the end of it. And so if I can see major chaos ahead, then I don't start the novel. I'll confess, Shahida, I've finished the most recent novel. I've not started another novel, and I'm really enjoying it. I can do whatever I like. I can go out and do some gardening, climb a tree, catch a bus, go see a show. It doesn't matter, because I haven't got anything. I haven't got this huge thing at the back of my mind. I ought to be writing chapter 23. So I'm living this space for about 3-6 months, and then after that I get restless, and I think, okay, start another big thing, start another novel. Well, the short stories are just much more easy to manage. The poetry comes and goes. It's more, I can't trap it, I can't organize it. When the poems come, I write them. When they don't, I don't chase them. So yeah, that's how I've resolved it. But I think everybody finds their own formula and their own sense of what they're going to excel in, and that's part of the journey as an artist, is to find that thing that you're good at, or those things. There can be more than one.
Right. So the formula is that there is no set formula. depending on the situation.
Always. This is why
Yeah,
it's art, not science.
don't get too used to doing your gardening and enjoying yourself, though. You need to get back. And I think as writing is a very solitary profession, the importance of organizations such as Commonword um, plays, is more relevant, their role, because in your life as a writer, you tend to be very much involved in a set space that you sit down and write, and quite often to be able to share your writing and get feedback on it is a blessing. So there you are. So it's very important to be doing what you're doing. So don't do too much of the gardening, because everything else that you do affects quite a few of us. So yeah, that's writing for you. It's a very, as you said, a full-time job, and it takes over your whole life. You mentioned some of the barriers that might, well, I call them barriers, but they're part of life. For example, children doing your everyday chore, living, it comes in a way of writing. Sometimes life itself, everyone goes through all these periods that, they're dealing with different stuff. And sometimes just getting on with your life is a challenge, never mind getting on with your writing. So in terms of you, how does Pete deal with difficult times? Is there anything that would help you to rise through whatever it is that pushes you down? How do you carry on, both in terms of personal or your profession?
I guess to some extent, I don't write against the difficulty. I don't. I can, and I can be completely immersed in a project to the extent that everything that's happening in the external world, everything, which is where all the problems are, don't affect me. I'm completely focused on this imagined world and what's going on there. So it's a great escape from the realities of life. But sometimes when those realities are overwhelming, as I say, I don't fight them. Instead, I write into them. So during one particular difficult time in my life, I wrote a Gothic script, which is full of horror and scary things, and there was a lot of horror and scary things going on around me. Instead of competing, I was trying to push it away. I let it come to me and just wrote. I wrote a radio play actually based on that feeling of kind of inchoate, not quite clear. You can't quite put your finger on what this fear and danger is, but it's there. I use that sense to write that in that genre. So yeah, I tend to try to choose, certainly with the short stories and the short things you can write relatively quickly, like the radio plays there. I try to not fight the mood that surrounds me, but rather to write into it. For the novels, as I say, that's why it's so much more difficult, because you might say, right, I'm going to write a romantic fiction, and then your romantic life is a complete disaster, and you realize you should have written a tragedy. So yeah, it's much harder with the long form. And then I think the alternative method, which is that the writing is an escape, the writing is a place which is unaffected by what's going on in the mundane life in the ordinary world, and that's the two ways in which I've found to survive and keep going as a writer.
Fantastic, thank you. Would you like to tell us about the best advice that someone has given to you and it's worked for you in life?
Okay. Well, I get lots of advice. I think we all get lots of advice from lots of different quarters. And I think it took a long time to absorb this, but I think several different people said to me, you read a lot, you you observe the writing of others and the poetry of others and the techniques of others, etc. But ultimately, you write yourself. You be true to yourself, be authentic to yourself, and value your own experiences, rather than try to be somebody else. Don't try to be Charles Dickens. Don't try to be Shakespeare. Don't try to be, I don't know, Maya Angelou. Don't try to be, you write from your own experience and write from your own sensibilities. Well, and once you commit to saying, my life has stories within it which can work as literature that are interesting in themselves, then you develop a voice which is unique, of course, or voices, because the other advice, which is slightly contradictory, perhaps, that I received that I felt was very valuable, was that we are all a multiplicity. We are all many things at once. And it contradicts this idea of finding your voice singular. I've always felt that, actually I have voices, and finding them and putting them to paper is what matters. And so some genres are better for that multiplicity than others. Poetry, I would say, is quite mono, but the novel often has many characters with competing ideas, competing understandings of the world, etc. And so a novel is a form of multiplicity. And so are, say, theatre plays, radio plays, where you have many different voices who each can have their own worldview and their own attitude, etc. And each of them, in some respects, that these characters each are an aspect of yourself. And so, I found that this formulation to accept your multiplicity hooked up to the idea that, to write yourself, even understanding that self can be a multiplicity. Between the two of them, they serve me quite well.
Jar of Words is a writing website. And one question that I normally ask from my guests is that if they were to name one book, or perhaps a few books that they have read at some point of their life, which they find it valuable and useful to them, and they find it helpful in terms of whether how they feel internally or their view towards outside world, what book would that be?
Do I have to choose just one?
No. If
okay.
Quite often.
Some I will explain, some I won't explain. So people are going to think, why did he choose that book? Just the first book, I would say, without explanation, it's going to be really eerie. I think it's Cicero's Murder Trials.
Okay.
It's an amazing book. And from antiquity. I read, obviously, the English language version. After that, Gorky, the Russian author Gorky, and maybe, I think there's a slim volume of his called My Universities. That was really useful. I don't think the character actually visits a university. So it was a concept of you can learn from life itself. You don't need to go to a special place to learn, And I thought that was really important because, some people think you can only be knowledgeable or good at something if you studied it to the nth degree at university, but it's not the case. Gorky's My University is a fantastic story, which was saying something important, I felt. Then Zami. Zami is, I'm looking to see if I've got it. Yeah, by Audre Lorde. I can still see it there. It's so important to me. I always like it close by. Zami is the autobiography of Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde was an absolutely superb writer and thinker, and her autobiography is written in a highly unique way, and it's probably the most moving and inspiring autobiography I've ever read, as well as the original, unusual. So yeah, she's absolutely phenomenal, Audre Lorde. And then I think I seem to have a tendency to the Russian, don't I? Because I like the brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, just because everyone knows Dostoevsky is such a great writer. He's this idea of multiplicity, loads of voices, all saying different things. He's the one. Lastly, I guess if I choose one more, I'd say I don't even know if I pronounce her name correctly, but Ntozake Shange wrote a collection of poems called Nappy Edges. And Nappy Edges is probably the best poetry book I've ever read, and fired me with a desire to write poetry that could at least approach the levels that Shange reached. So yeah, so in sum, this wrote Murder Trials, Gorky My Universities, Dusky, the Brothers Karamazov, Audre Lorde, Zami, and Ntozake Shange, Nappy Edges. I could go on. The problem is I love so many books. I don't really have one book, and if you ask me the same question next week, the whole list will have changed because it depends what mood I'm in and what problems are in my life that I want to look at literature to try and find some insight about, etc. So it's a moving buffet, a moving banquet.
Yeah. What a good way of explaining it. Yeah, it is. And sometimes depending on which age you read a particular book is also have different effect. I've read many books as a teenager that I either liked or disliked, and now that I'm rereading them, I'm discovering a new way of connecting with them. So that's an interesting subject on its own. So, okay, thanks. That should be enough. I will add the details of your social media in case anyone is interested in following you and finding out more about your work. And I also put a link to the books that you mentioned. Again, if anybody is interested and they want to carry on reading it. So is there anything else that you would like to add?
I would just want to say, Shahira, thank you ever so much for asking me what are my favorite books, because I didn't realize, but you know what? I love to talk about my favorite books. I was going to gush for another half hour. It's such a lovely subject, and it just conjures up all the tingles as I think about the different books. It's funny. So thank you for asking that question.
Oh, you're welcome. It's also good. It's good because sometimes when you want to read a particular book, knowing a little bit about it, and even if it's a case of so and so has read it and they find it interesting, I think it gives a good angle of approach. Sometimes, you read it and you might not agree and you might not see what other person has seen in that particular book, which is fine, which is what reading and writing is all about. But it's good to have a space to just talk about books. Is amazing. So the last thing that remains for me is to thank you for accepting to be here and giving up your time to talk to us. So thank you very much to everyone who's been with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and thank you for everyone who's watching us. Goodbye from jarawords.com.